To young adults, college life is one phase of their lives where utmost freedom is almost within their reach. Not too young for parents to always keep an eye on them, but not too old for parents to just let them be. This is that phase of life where enjoyment is at its peak, and one young adult would almost certainly maximize that enjoyment to its fullest. On the night of June 28, 1993, two UPLB students would ultimately be deprived of life and its joy, becoming victims of brutality by being at the wrong place at the wrong time. Antonio Leija Sanchez, born May 10, 1949, was a Filipino politician whose career was better publicized as the mayor of Calauan, Laguna. He first served as vice mayor from January 1, 1972 until June 30, 1980. After building up his political career, he decided to run as mayor of the same municipality from which he won. He served as Calauan's mayor from June 30, 1980 until March 26, 1986. That stint as a mayor was cut short due to the government reshuffle by then-President Cory Aquino, who during the time forced the resignation of all government unit heads and appointed officers in charge of their positions. He would eventually resume office on February 2, 1988, and remain seated in power until August 13, 1993. Mary Eileen Y. Sarmenta, 21, was a student scholar taking up Bachelor of Science in Agriculture at the University of the Philippines, Los Baños, with a major in food and nutrition for large animals. Alan Gomez, 19, meanwhile, was also an agriculture student majoring in beef production. Both were regular university students and young adults basking on the days of collegiate experience. They met as classmates at one of their subjects. They would play board games and card games at downtime, and would usually hang out with other college friends. Both were also members of sorority and fraternity, Eileen being with the Sigma Delta, while Alan with Upsilon Sigma Phi. Due to their keen closeness, some accounts reported them to have a mutual relationship, but others denied and said they were just really close friends and schoolmates. Eileen was also known to have a boyfriend at that time, also a UPLB student named Cesar Ong. The connection between the mayor and Eileen was established when the latter interviewed the mayor for their school paper sometime in the summer of 1993. It was then that Sanchez began to take interest in the young Sarmenta. June 28, 1993, 8:30 a.m., Calauan, Laguna. George Medialdea and driver Aurelio Centeno fetched Vicencio Malabanan at his residence, driving on a municipal ambulance with plate number SBB 707 and with the sweepstakes emblem chiseled on its sides. Medialdea told Malabanan that they will be apprehending Rodolfo Calva, also known as Tisoy, a notorious gun runner and drug pusher in their locale. After picking up Malabanan, they drove and picked up Zoilo Ama in Barangay Maslit, followed by Luis Corcolon in Barangay Mabacan. 5 men now boarded the ambulance. They made stopovers in Barangay Imok and Barangay Wawa, then got back to Calauan around 7 o'clock p.m. in the evening. At the Shell gas station in Calauan, the men picked up the rest of the crew: Luis's brother Rogelio Boy Corcolon, Pepito Kawit, and Baldwin Brion. The 8-man crew is now complete. Calauan Deputy Chief Officer George Medialdea, brothers and mayor's personal bodyguards Luis and Rogelio Boy Corcolon, Mayor Security Team Member SPO3 Vicencio Malabanan, PO3 Zoilo Ama, Mayor's caretaker and gardener Pepito Kawit, Mayor's nephew Baldwin Brion, and then their driver Aurelio Centeno, all of which are henchmen for then Calauan Mayor Antonio Sanchez. From there, they would eventually drive to UPLB. On their way there, Luis told them the real purpose for their gathering that night: to pick up a gift for the mayor, a girl who was supposedly so beautiful that she was guaranteed to make their saliva drip. They first took the way directly to the main university building, but unfortunately did not find their gift. Driving at a snail pace while surveying the streets, Luis then asked the ambulance driver Centeno to go to a popular student hangout, the Agrix shopping complex. When they arrived at the area, 6 of the 8 men alighted the vehicle, leaving only driver Centeno and Malabanan inside. As they offboarded, Centeno overheard Medialdea pick up the radio and informed the boss that they were already in the area. The boss, as we already know, was Mayor Antonio Sanchez. By this time, it was already past 10 o'clock p.m. in the evening. Meanwhile, 2 UPLB students named Mary Eileen Sarmenta and Alan Gomez found themselves in the front seats of a Toyota Tamaro van with plate number GBD684, driven and owned by Alan's family. The van is parked just outside Cafe Amalia, a restaurant in the Agrix shopping complex, just a few blocks from the main UPLB compound. They had previously made stopovers to Top's restaurant to see Eileen's best friend, and then to Pogi and Sexy's store to buy some beers. As the 6 henchmen saw the 2 students, they immediately proceeded to the direction of the parked van. Without warning, the men immediately opened the front passenger doors, dragged the 2 students out of the Toyota van, and then pushed them inside again to the back seats. Once everyone was inside, their mouths were gagged with cloth and hands tied with rope. In less than a minute, they had full control of the 2 helpless students and the entire vehicle. Taking a cue from Luis, the vehicle immediately sped out of the complex, with the ambulance they rode to get there trailing them from behind. From there, both vehicles would proceed to Erai's farm in Barangay Curba. Erai's farm was a privately owned farm by Mayor Sanchez, which he used as a sanctuary for relaxation, a serene place away from the distressed political world where he belongs. As soothing as that description was, it was also the place where the dreams of 2 young and innocent college students would end that night. Upon reaching the private farm, the henchmen alighted the 2 students out of the vehicle. As they were standing in the middle of the yard, Mayor Sanchez, in his jogging attire, emerged from one of the rest houses. He said,
"Mga anak, anong problema dito?"
Luis Corcolon answered,
"Mayor, ito po yung regalo namin sa inyo. Ito po yung babae na matagal nyo ng kursunada."
The mayor, in both delight and confusion, answered,
Aba, ang ganda talaga ng babaeng yan. Pero, sinong kasama niyang lalaki?
George Medialdea then responded,
"Boss, kasama ho yan ng babae yung lalaki. Isinama na rin ho namin para wala pong bulilyaso."
As the introduction ends, Eileen was taken inside one of the rest houses. From there, she would be endlessly abused and raped by Mayor Sanchez. Meanwhile, outside, Gomez is taken into one of the other rest houses. He would then be subjected to severe physical beating at the hands of the Corcolon brothers and the 2 policemen, Ama and Medialdea. The 4 endlessly took turns beating the tied and gagged student. Kawit later on decided to join. After a while, Kawit looked as if he was not yet content with the beating, so he took his Armalite rifle and delivered a butt-suck blow to the body. The blow caused Gomez to flinch backwards in extreme pain, dislodging his stance and falling into a nearby concrete slab. Brion thought the blow killed Gomez and asked Kawit if the student was already dead, to which Kawit responded,
"Mamamatay na rin yan, maya-maya."
Aurelio Centeno, now a little bit disgruntled, joined Sanchez's personal aides Edwin Cosico and Raul Alorico to watch television at another nearby rest house. While watching, Alorico told Centeno that the mayor was a little anxious earlier, citing he had been waiting for the group for his gift and worried that they would not arrive. Few hours passed. It was now 1 a.m. in the morning, June 29. Henchmen Luis and Medialdea dragged the crying Eileen out of the rest house. The poor young woman was still tied and mouth gagged with a handkerchief, but her hair was now disgruntled and naked from the waist down. Mayor Sanchez, looking exhausted in his white polo shirt, said,
O sige mga anak, salamat sa regalo ninyo. Salamat sa regalo ninyo sa akin. Tapos na ako, sa inyo na yan. Bahala na kayo dyan. Ano naman ang gagawin niyo sa lalaki?
Medialdea responded,
"Boss, papatayin na rin namin ito para wala pong bulilyaso."
And so, the 2 helpless students were again loaded into the Tamaro van. They headed back to Calauan proper, trailed behind by the ambulance driven by Centeno. On the way to Barangay Imo, Centeno saw the Tamaraw van sway from side to side. He thought there was a commotion and struggle inside. Then a single gunshot was heard. Moments later, the Tamaraw van stopped at the side of the road. Pepito Kawit then dragged the bloodied and almost lifeless body of Alan Gomez out of the vehicle and into the ground. Seconds later, he aimed his Armalite and fired another bullet to his head, instantly killing the young man. Alan's body was then dumped in the nearby grass, lifeless, bloodied, and face down beside the road. The Tamaraw van and ambulance continued to their destination. They are headed to a place where they can begin their turn on the mayor's gift, a sugarcane field in Sitio Paputok, Barangay Mabacan in Calauan. When they arrived, Luis Corcolon, with a grinning smile on his face, said to everyone,
Turbuhin na natin ang tinurbo ni boss.
to which everyone responded in choral delight. The carnal men held down both her hands and feet, then took turns gang-raping the poor lady. First was Luis, then Medialdea, followed by Boy, Ama, Brion, and then lastly, Kawit. Eileen was crying the whole time, her hapless pleas heard by deaf ears behind her stifled mouth, while all these men were busy in the middle of sexual rage. When it was Kawit's turn, he invited Centeno to join the fun, but the latter refused, saying he could not bear taking part in that absolute horror in front of him. As Kawit finished his sexual assault on the poor lady, Eileen was left floored at the back of the van, her both legs sore and aching, motionless, almost in a near-death exhausted state. Gathering her last few strings of strength, she braced her arms and knelt by the cedars. She then started to beg for her life to her abductors and rapists, but her plea was once again voided. Luis Corcolon hears her, stuffs a handkerchief in her mouth, and then proceeds to shoot her in the eye with his baby Armalite, the final act of desecration to a woman whose hopes and dreams they had just gruesomely ended. After the deed and the killing, they left her in that stolen Tamaraw van, alone, naked and dead in the middle of the night. Her once bright smiling face, now riddled with a hole from the gunshot to her eye, her mouth stuffed with a rolled black handkerchief, her white shirt rolled up to her armpits, exposing her breasts, and her underwear pushed down near her feet, still with her white rubber shoes on. It was already nearing dawn by that time, and the men decided to not get rid of the body. They were confident that they had the mayor and police on their side, and thus, they could easily just get away with it. In a matter of minutes, all 8 henchmen left the area with the ambulance. Aboard the ambulance, the men discussed how heavenly savoring the experience was, with Centeno and Malabanan remaining quiet on their thoughts. During this trip home, they also discussed their cover-up plan. Quiet on the steering wheel the whole time, Centeno drove all of them to their respective homes and went home himself before the sun broke into the horizon anew. June 29, 6:30 a.m. Driving again in the ambulance, Centeno and Medialdea fetched Malabanan, Ama, and Luis Corcolon. They are about to conduct an operation in Barangay Imok to continue their chase for Tisoy, the cover-up ploy for the rape and murder they did just few hours earlier. They first proceeded to the place where they dumped the body of Alan Gomez. Upon reaching the site in Barangay Imok, Luis, Medialdea, and Malabanan alighted from the ambulance and acted as if they just found a dead body in the middle of their operation. Luis ordered Centeno to drive back to Calauan Municipal Hall and make an immediate report about the discovery of an identified young man. The body of Alan Gomez was afterwards escorted to UPLB Police Headquarters for identification. Around the same time, Boy Corcolon went to the Municipal Hall to report a dead female inside the Tamaraw van that was found in Barangay Mabacan, and immediately went to PO3 Zoilo Ama to disclose his discovery. Pretending to act on the tip, PO3 Ama radioed Calauan PNP Chief Major Robin Caño, who then ordered SPO2 Melencio Nunez to investigate the report. Centeno, who was now in the Municipal Hall that time, was also instructed to fetch the 3 men in Barangay Imok. After picking up the 3, they went to Barangay Mabacan to act on the tip. From there, they would find the body of Eileen Sarmenta they left hours earlier. The sight of Eileen's body was of pure agony. She was still the same dead, naked and bloodied body at the back of the Tamaraw van, but this time, her body had already started getting stiff due to rigor mortis. Medialdea, upon alighting the van and seeing the body, expressed pity for the young woman. He rolled down her t-shirt to cover up her exposed breast, then proceeded to cover the lower body with a sackcloth. Afterwards, Eileen's body was escorted by the ambulance and Major Caño's police car to the UPLB police station. It was at UPLB police headquarters where the two bodies would be reunited again. Several students rushed to the station. The peaceful air around the campus turned to a bleak of horror and agony as students saw the lifeless body of a young woman being off-boarded from a Toyota Antra van in front of them. As they opened up the cadaver for identification, tears and screams flooded the area. The body of the female victim was positively identified as Mary Eileen Sarmenta. Her dorm mate Kay in Laville, a dormitory for women inside UPLB next to the St. Therese Chapel, was one of those who positively identified the body based on her outfit, her melon orange Giordano classic shirt, and favorite white Tritorn rubber shoes. After finalizing the identification from the headquarters, Eileen's mother, Maria Clara Sarmenta, was informed of the tragedy, and as soon as she heard it through the phone, an agonizing cry was heard from her. The convoy then decided to take both cadavers to the Calauan Municipal Hall for proper disposition. When Centeno arrived at the Calauan Municipal Hall, he saw a prisoner named Arnold cleaning the stolen Tamaro FX van. In his mind, this was nothing short of trying to cover the evidence of the crime that they committed. By noon, the crime had been gathering media attention. Several people from the press, the National Bureau of Investigation, and PNP Criminal Information Service had started gathering around Calauan, each starting their own investigation and interviews about the crime. Around 12:30 p.m. in the afternoon, the group of henchmen arrived at Mayor Sanchez's house in Bay, Laguna, and reported what had been happening. The mayor got livid, castigating his men for not properly using their heads. He calms himself down, then proceeds to assure his men that he could fix a problem in less than the amount of a brand new car. He also told them to lay low profile for the meantime, while the issue is still a media hot mess. June 30, 1993, Mayor Sanchez meets with driver Aurelio Centeno at his home in Calauan. Their meeting focuses on discussing the big mess they're in, and Sanchez told him he's being hunted down due to his complicity to the crime. The mayor decided to give him 2,000 pesos and instructed him to stay low for a while, or better yet, flee the town and hide somewhere unknown. Centeno, now paranoid about his involvement, did not hesitate to flee the town afterwards. Later that day, Mayor Sanchez gave PNP Chief Major Caño a pair of white shorts and maong pants. According to him, the short was allegedly the one Eileen Sarmenta was wearing when she disappeared 2 nights earlier. He also mentioned the maong pants had been found on a national highway in Barangay Balayhangin by a card gambler named Mang Torio, who turned it over to him while they were jogging that early morning. Despite the claims, the police thought it was a little suspicious how he gained possession of such artifacts, knowing how disconnected the location of the evidence and where the body was found is. And so, days slowly went by. By this time, the crime had reached full-blown media attention, and with this publicity, the Calauan police were quick to act on the investigation and would eventually succeed in naming several persons of interest. One by one, the 8 henchmen fell into the hands of the authorities. Ironically, it was the 3 policemen who were the first ones to be detained. A week after the crime, July 6, Medialdea, Malabanan, and Ama had been detained pending the filing of formal charges against them. Another week later, July 12, brothers Luis and Boy Corcolon surrendered peacefully to CIS authorities in Camp Crame after being escorted by Mayor Sanchez himself and 2 other high-ranking officials, General Quizon and Colonel Hilario. 4 days later, July 16, Pepito Kawit was apprehended and interrogated by Calauan police in his Barangay Bagong Pook residence. 2 weeks later, July 29, Baldwin Brion was arrested at his father-in-law's house without any warrant. The arresting officer told him that Colonel Navarro wanted to interview him. And finally, the last henchman to fall into the hands of the authorities was Aurelio Centeno, who was apprehended almost 2 weeks later, August 10, while doing some chores in Divisoria. Now with all the henchmen behind bars, investigation about the gruesome crime can now proceed. An enraged nation watches through their television screens anxiously waiting every day for updates on the case. And thus, it begins. Every suspected henchman had almost one common denominator in their alibi. They were at their respective homes that night of June 28. Both the Corcolon brothers and the three policemen are in unison in pointing out the mastermind, Chofilo Kit Alqueza, the 20-year-old student at UPLB and son of a feared military general, PNP Regional Director for Southern Mindanao General Dictador Baraco Alqueza. He was an SK chairperson in Laguna, Gomez's frat brother, and was Eileen's ex-boyfriend. The investigation during the whole month of July would then focus on going back and forth between the two main points, with very little factual progress, except that the henchmen were getting behind bars, one by one. People feared the lack of substantial evidence would eventually dismiss the case against these people, but that would change one August day with the capture of the last henchman. August 10, 1993, out in the busy Divisoria market, CIS personnel apprehended Aurelio Centeno, the ambulance driver whom Mayor Sanchez ordered to hide out somewhere undisclosed more than a month ago. He was out in Divisoria doing some chores when several CIS approached and immediately handcuffed him while serving his warrant of arrest. Once interrogated at Camp Vicente Lim, Centeno testified and agreed to be a star witness to the crime. SPO3 Malabanan then followed. Later that day, Mayor Sanchez received an anonymous call saying he should leave the country within 3 days. Otherwise, there's a huge probability of an impending arrest for him. The mayor declined, saying his conscience is clear. August 13, 1993, Centeno would make his initial sworn statement. In this, he changed several details. 1. He initially said that Eileen and Alan were brought to CPA MMSville instead of Erai's farm. 2. This initial sworn statement implicated Kit Alqueza as the mastermind. And 3. Centeno mentioned he drove the Corcolon brothers to the house of Edgardo Uod Lavadia in Bangkal Street, Los Baños, Laguna. He said in that house he saw Lavadia and Alqueza talking, from which the latter handed an envelope. This was tied in with the Kit Alqueza angle that the Corcolon brothers and the three policemen involved were trying to establish. All the alleged suspects would then be presented in front of police officials, investigators, and press reporters at Camp Vicente Lim in Canlubang, Laguna. Mayor Sanchez was also summoned via a letter invitation issued the day before by PNP Commander Rex Piat. From here, the mayor would meet again with all of his henchmen, including the two who became star witnesses. In the middle of the live investigation, Centeno and Malabanan would pin Mayor Sanchez's involvement in the crime. The two pointed to Mayor Sanchez as the first to rape Eileen Sarmenta. Hearing this, General Salimbangon instructed the two henchmen to implicate the mayor. Sanchez was only there for questioning purposes, but with the witness's conviction, he was immediately placed in arrest status. He was then heard cursing Salimbangon, accusing the general of framing him up. For this conviction, Judge Lanzanas immediately issued a warrant of arrest against Antonio L. Sanchez for violation of RA number 6713, an act establishing code of conduct and ethical standards for public officials and employees. In front of media reporters and police officers, a sobbing Malabanan went near PO3 Ama and embraced him. He asked for his forgiveness because he had already implicated him in the crime. Malabanan said he could no longer bear the torture being inflicted on him and the looming threats to both his life and family. They assured his safety by saying they will be placed under the Witness Protection Program, where they would be entitled to allowances, free housing facilities, and a chance to go abroad with their families where they can live peacefully. But Medjaldea stood pat with his refusal, saying he cannot testify falsely against his companions just to free himself. Malabanan was then heard saying it is still better to live than to die a martyr. At the end of the investigation press conference, all henchmen including the mayor were brought back to their respective cells where they would be confined for the majority of the trial. August 15, 1993, Centeno would make changes to his sworn statement. In this version, he changed several major details on the crime. 1. He said that Eileen and Alan were brought to Erai's farm and not CPA MMSville. 2. This version would also completely eradicate the Kit Alqueza angle and point the mastermind to Mayor Antonio Sanchez. He revealed that a CIS agent named Romel dictated him the information he will disseminate and threatened him that he would be hurt if he did not cooperate. He also revealed that his first sworn statement was because he was still hoping the mayor would help him. Furthermore, he was afraid of its power and influence both in his jurisdiction and connections within the government. Now that Mayor Sanchez is behind bars, he can spill the truth without putting too much risk in life. It was also this day that his family was placed into protective CIS custody. However, he still did not ask for the deletion of the statement pinning Keith Alqueza to the crime because he reasoned out he was still in CIS custody and there might still be repercussions. It was only on August 30 that he agreed to delete the statement reference to Keith Alqueza when he was already under the Witness Protection Program, although he had been under it since August 17. Judge Harriet O. Demetrio of the Pasig City Regional Trial Court, Branch 70, was the presiding judge handling this case. She described Centeno's actions as, "In thus passing upon the credibility of Centeno, this court kept his alleged dubious reputation for veracity in mind. But, after carefully reviewing the testimony of Centeno in his direct examination and grueling cross-examination for almost 3 months, this court, even with a jaundiced eye, could not help but be impressed about the myriad of details in his testimony and his frank, spontaneous, and straightforward manner of testifying. The lengthy and punishing cross-examination by 7 lawyers to which he was subjected failed to bring out any serious flaw or infirmity in his perception or recollection of events or destroy the coherence of his narration. That Centeno merely wove such a yarn from his fertile imagination, conflict with a multitude of details, is highly improbable considering that his highest educational attainment was 6th grade in the elementary school. Centeno's explanation is quite believable because he had already implicated the accused Sanchez in his sworn statement of August 13, 1993. Thus, the portion implicating Keith Alqueza does not jive with the main story of Centeno that Eileen Sarmenta was abducted by Medialdea, Ama, the Corcolon brothers, Brion, and Kawit to be given as a gift to their boss, Mayor Sanchez. This court is inclined to accept the explanation of Centeno that his earlier attempt to mislead the investigators by saying that the victims were taken to CPA-MMS was out of fear of the mayor. Our Supreme Court has recognized the inherent fear of reprisal by witnesses who refuse initially to disclose what they know about the crime is quite understandable, especially when the accused is a man of power and influence in the community. August 19, 1993. Prosecution witness Major Lolita Chambers, together with Colonel Gualberto and other officers, went on a rice farm in Calauan to gather evidence as effect to the search warrant issued by RTC Judge Heraldez. They uncovered a missing belt loop from the pair of white shorts worn by Eileen on the night of the crime, as well as a cigarette butt that was alleged to have used to burn a part of Sarmenta's body. After the retrieval, she cross-examined the evidence and later concluded that this matched with the other piece of belt loop she detached from the shorts that was surrendered to Major Caño. Additional evidence scattering efforts uncovered the M16 bullet recovered where Alan Gomez's body was found in Barangay Imok. The ballistic examination on the empty shell conducted by FID-PNP Chief Ballistician Vicente de Vera revealed that the striations of the empty shell were the same as those registered by the cartridges of M16 rifle bearing serial number 773159, surrendered by Luis Corcolon. De Vera also found the metallic fragments recovered from Eileen's body to bear the same characteristics as those from a bullet fired from an M16 rifle. Autopsy and vaginal examinations were also done prior by prosecution witness Dr. Vladimir Villaseñor, medical legal officer of PNP-CIS. In a nutshell, he disclosed the presence of multiple contusions on the body, fresh, shallow lacerations on her hymen, a congested cervix, a gaping labia majora, and oozing whitish fluid from the vaginal opening, which tested positive for spermatozoa, or a man's seminal fluid. He further explained that the oozing spermatozoa means the amount of semen inside was more than the vaginal canal could contain. He also noted that the great amount of whitish fluid continued to ooze out from her vagina, despite being dead for several hours. Concluding these findings, he dished out the high likely possibility of unconsented sexual intercourse and gang rape. All this evidence proved to be highly corroborating to the testimonies of Centeno and Malabanan. The angle involving Keith Alqueza as mastermind would eventually be dismissed as well, based on the conducted lie detector test and the conflicting details between the sworn statements of Luis Corcolon and Edgar Lavadia. The mayor blatantly denied all these, saying all evidence gathered inside his property were planted and used to frame him up. Here is a detailed breakdown of his alibi, detailing his whereabouts and actions between June 28 and June 30. Mayor Sanchez was with his mistress Elvira Sanchez in Bay Laguna on the night of June 28. He said they arrived at Elvira's house at around 10 o'clock p.m. that night, after making stops in Makati City and San Pablo Laguna earlier that day. He and his mistress would be at that house until 12:30 p.m. the next day, until Malabanan, Medialdea, and Ama arrived at his residence to inform him of a crime, which forced him to go back to Calauan at around 4 p.m. in the afternoon. Upon arriving in Calauan, he instructed his driver Mario Puyales to go to Barangay Masiit and Balay Hangin to inquire from the residents about the crime. Puyales returned to the mayor's residence at around 7 p.m. with his findings and told him about a certain card gambler who picked up a white short lying near the National Highway in Barangay Balay Hangin. He then sent back Puyales to that barangay to inform the residents to temporarily keep the evidence, as that may help with the police investigation. Early morning of June 30, he jogged towards the direction of Barangay Mabacan, together with some companions, and along the way asked some of the residents about the crime that had happened just 2 nights ago. A certain Mang Torio surrendered a piece of maong pants to the mayor, who in turn asked him to keep the artifact for now, as he will send someone to pick it up. Eventually, Mayor Sanchez would get both the artifacts of evidence, a completely clean and without any tear shorts, and a maong pants. He would then surrender both these pieces of evidence to Major Robin Caño. Building up on this alibi, he put out the results of his personal investigation. In this investigation, he is pinning Kit Alqueza as the mastermind behind the killing. Mayor Sanchez informed Congressman Tingzon of Kit's involvement in the crime, who then disclosed that Kit was hiding in his house. Tingzon said he will call Kit's father, General Alqueza, who was at Davao City that time, to discuss the matters before doing anything legal. He detailed that according to additional investigation conducted by Medialdea, Alqueza was seen with bloody knuckles the day after the crime, while Luis Corcolon said Kit was planning to kill Gomez over another girl named Rose. He would also compound on his personal investigation by saying he had frequent evening conferences with the police officers Malabanan, Medialdea, and Ama, members of Major Caño's investigation team, but at the same were his henchmen and among the suspects. On September 12, 1993, just 2.5 months after the crime, the court formally read the case against Antonio Sanchez, George Medialdea, Luis and Rogelio Corcolon, Zoilo Ama, Pepito Kawit, and Baldwin Brion. The men all had different alibis. Medialdea said they were chasing Tisoy the whole day of June 28, until they decided they couldn't catch him and went home, then played mahjong with his wife's friends that night. Luis Corcolon said he was with Medialdea on the Tisoy entrapment, but decided to retire that evening and reach his house around 9:30 p.m. Rogelio Corcolon said he was just at his house the whole day of June 28 until early morning of June 29, where he proceeded to Calauan Municipal Hall to help report the discovery of the body of a young woman in Barangay Mabacan. Zoilo Ama said he was also with Medialdea and Luis on the entrapment. But after the failed manhunt, he went home to Barangay Maslit at around 10 p.m. and did not leave the house till next morning. Baldwin Brion said he was just at his residence in J. Del Valle Street in Calauan the whole day of June 28. Pepito Kawit said he was at Mayor Sanchez's residence in Calauan the whole day of June 28, sleeping around 9 p.m. in the evening and waking up at around 6 a.m. the next day to water the plants. Along with their detailed alibis, they contested several points of Centeno's story. 1. The changing of details from CPA MMSville to Erai's farm in his sworn statement. 2. Centeno merely referred to a person named Edwin and another person he did not know who was in the place where the victims were brought. In his defense, Centeno supplied the surname Cosico and the other person as Lito Angeles in his August 17 sworn statement. 3. The inconsistencies when he said he drove the Corcolon brothers to Edgardo Lavadia in Bangka, Los Baños on June 26, and then changing it in his August 30 sworn statement saying he did not go to Bangkal and was with Malabanan, Mayor Sanchez, and Medialdea that whole day. Along with these major sworn statement points, they would also contest portions of the testimony detailed as the following. Number 1. Give exactly where the appellants went after sexually abusing Eileen. Number 2. He was unsure whether it was Eileen's left or right foot that hit the chair of the van when she was struggling. Number 3. He was unsure of their speed while on their way to the UP compound. Number 4. He could not give the exact distance between the ambulance he was driving and the van. Number 5. He said he could see the protruding end of the roof of a kubo when he parked the ambulance. Appellants claimed that from where Centeno was allegedly standing, there was no way he could see the roof of that kubo. Number 6. He was able to recall what appellants were wearing on that night of June 28, 1993. Number 7. He saw Kawit hit Alan at his diaphragm with the butt of an Armalite, but the medical legal finding of Dr. Escueta revealed no injury in the abdominal region of Alan. Number 8. His testimony that the appellants raped Eileen inside the van, which was very limited space, while appellants could have chosen a far more comfortable or remote place to do the crime. Number 9. His testimony to the effect that appellants rolled their pants down to their knees and then climbed the van to rape Eileen. Number 10. His admission that he can lie for money or out of fear. The court deemed these inconsistencies may have marred some of the truths behind Centeno's statement, but as the handed-out court decision indicated, they refer to trivial details which do not, in actuality, touch upon the whys and wherefores of the crime committed. It was also established before that the changing of major details in his statement was, in admittance of the state witness himself, due to fear for his life. In a gruesome span of 16 months bearing 4 days of trial each week, the back-and-forth mud throwing at the court hall slowly but surely progressed. On November 9, 1993, Mayor Sanchez even filed a petition mainly citing his unlawful arrest on August 13. However, this petition was dismissed by the Supreme Court. On January 25, 1995, Sanchez's lawyers Mario Onquico, Antonio Bucoy, and Ernesto Brion begged off from the case following a serious professional disagreement. Left behind his legal team were attorney Salvador Panelo, who currently serves as the chief presidential legal advisor, and attorney Marcelino Arias. Finally, on March 11, 1995, Judge Harriet Demetrio, Pasig RTC Branch 70, formally handed out the verdict in her 132-page decision, naming Antonio Sanchez, George Medialdea, Luis Corcolon, Rogelio Corcolon, Zoilo Ama, Baldwin Brion, and Pepito Kawit guilty beyond reasonable doubt of the crime of rape with homicide on 7 counts and sentenced each and every one of them. They were to suffer the maximum penalty of reclusión perpetua or life imprisonment for each of the 7 offenses, or a total of 7 reclusión perpetua for each accused. In addition, the court instructed the suspects to pay the following damages to both the Sarmenta and Gomez family. Number 1. The sum of 3,432,650 pesos, representing the actual damages sustained by the Sarmenta family. Number 2. The sum of 3,484,000 pesos, representing the actual damages sustained by the Gomez family. Number 3. The sum of 2 million pesos as moral damages sustained by the Sarmenta family. Number 4. The sum of 2 million pesos as moral damages sustained by the Gomez family. Number 5. The sum of 191,000 pesos as attorney's fees and litigation expenses incurred by the Gomez family. And number 6. The sum of 164,250 pesos for litigation expenses incurred by the Sarmenta family. In addition to the imposed fines, the decision handed out an indemnity amount of 50,000 pesos each to be paid to the respective heirs of the Sarmenta and Gomez family, totaling to 700,000 pesos. The court halls echoed with cries and curses. On the prosecution side, tears ran down the eyes of the families of Sarmenta and Gomez, while on the defendant's side, Mayor Sanchez was furious about the decision, shouting random curses and using the idea of getting framed up, as he was dragged by policemen while in handcuffs. Meanwhile, the other suspects remained quiet while getting dragged to their respective cells. It was a much-awaited win for the family of the victims, being haunted every day for the past 2 years of what happened to their loved ones. In a now famous line from Mayor Sanchez from one of the previous hearings, he was heard saying,
"Nakadiretso po ang mukha ako sa kanilang lahat. Kahit tadtarin kami nila ng pinong-pino, wala po kaming mga kasalanan sa kanila, at wala po kaming ginagahasa sa kanila, at wala po kaming pinapatay na tao sa kanila."
4 years later, on January 25, 1999, the Supreme Court affirmed the guilty verdict by the Pasig Regional Trial Court on Sanchez and his 6 men. 8 months later, on August 27, 1999, Mayor Sanchez, together with Luis Corcolon and a certain Artemio Averion and Landrito Ding Peradillas, were sentenced to 2 counts of reclusión perpetua for the murder of father and son Nelson and Rickson Peñalosa on April 13, 1991. Nelson Peñalosa was a political leader and supported Sanchez's political opponent that time, Virvilio Belasina. The verdict increased his sentence to 9 counts of life imprisonment, or a timeline equal to 360 years in prison. In October 18, 2001, they filed a motion for reconsideration, citing that he was a victim of trial by publicity, as well as pointing out the lack of credibility with Centeno and Malabanan. The motion, however, was dismissed while issuing adjustments to the fines imposed on the previous resolution. On October 10, 2006, authorities found methamphetamine and marijuana inside Sanchez's jail during a surprise inspection. In his cell, several drug paraphernalia was found, including one heat-sealed sachet of shabu, a bag of marijuana leaves, an improvised tutor with shabu residue, 2 aluminum foil strips, and 2 disposable lighters. He was charged with possession of illegal drugs for this instance. However, the case was dismissed by Muntinlupa RTC in 2011 for failure of substantial evidence to claim that the confiscated paraphernalia was owned by Sanchez. In July 2010, he was again caught with 1.5 million peso worth of methamphetamine, which was concealed inside a statue of Virgin Mary at his cell. A follow-up Bureau of Corrections report revealed he tested positive for drug use. In November 2015, a window-type air conditioning unit and a flat-screen TV was seized inside his cell during a raid. Sanchez defended the possession of artifacts as a necessity, saying he needed them because he has skin asthma, as well as various heart and kidney conditions. He even presented medical records to prove the legitimacy of his medical claims. Bucor Director Ricardo Cruz III, who led the raid together with NBP Superintendent Richard Schwarzkopf Jr., said a former mayor will not be given special treatment. On August 20, 2019, the Department of Justice announced the possibility of releasing former Mayor Antonio Sanchez, alongside at least 11,000 inmates. This parole is in observance of a new law increasing good conduct time allowance and a Supreme Court decision applying the same law retroactively. Justice Secretary Menardo Guevara said Sanchez and others would benefit from RA 10592, which amended provisions of the revised penal code and allowed the credit of preventive imprisonment and revision of GCTA of persons deprived of liberty. Then Bureau of Corrections Chief Nicanor Faeldon said inmates who were imprisoned during the 90s would most likely be included in the release. The timeline was not clearly disclosed, but it was said the time computation is still in progress and the possibility is within 2 months, by October 2019. This news broke the hearts of the families of the victims, as well as millions of Filipinos who still cannot fathom the abomination of a crime Sanchez had committed. 2 days later, August 22, students and alumni from UPLB, Sarmenta-Gomez's alma mater, held a rally to protest the probable release of Sanchez. The next day, August 23, the Gabriela party list held a separate rally in front of the Justice Department, again in protest of the pending release of the convicted mayor. Being pressured, Bucor Chief Faeldon changed his tone on the Sanchez release and said,
Kasi marami siyang involvement sa some not good behaviors, baka hindi nga siya qualified. That's really the probability. He may not really qualify to go home today or in the next few months.
Former Court of Appeals Justice Harry Demetrio, the judge who hammered down the verdict, said in an interview
that definitely mamamatay si Sanchez dyan sa preso. Hindi na siya makakalabas. I am not scared of Sanchez. I don't care whether I get killed in the process or not. But I fear for the life and safety of these people. Mga pamilya Sarmenta, lalong-lalo na yung mga testigo, pamilya, siguradong babalikan sila. Siguradong bebultahan sila ni Sanchez.
Maria Clara Sarmenta, Eileen's mother, said in an interview,
everything came back to me as if I'm now back to 1993. Kaya yung sakit, yung hapdi, lahat ng pain, lahat ng struggles mo, and lahat ng paghihirap mo para mabuhay kayo ulit na normal, bumalik ulit sa akin yun.
Iluminada Gomez, Alan's mother and a former teacher in UPLB, said in the same interview,
forgetting is just a lip service. We just say we are willing to forget, but no, it occurs. It comes any time of the night, any time of the day, any time of the week at all. So it's there. It seems we will have to cope up with it until the end.
Kay, Eileen's stormmate, said, all of a sudden, the fear and horror resurfaced with the news that Sanchez might be freed soon. It's painful to me. How much more to her loved ones? I can't bear the thought of how much pain her parents must be going through right now. Liza Maza, chairperson of the Gabriela party list who headed the rally outside the Justice Department building on August 23, said,
Ito po ay isang pagsalaula sa ating justice system. Malinaw po na marami rin siyang paglabag na ginawa nung siya ay nasa kalungan, kaya hindi siya karapat-dapat ng lumaya. Wala pong good conduct na ginawa si Mayor Sanchez, si rapist murderer Sanchez.
On the other side of the story, former Mayor Sanchez was interviewed inside about his impending release. Decades after the case, he still stood by his innocence and said this was nothing more than a political plot against him since he was running for governor back then. He added in the interview,
Ang istorya talaga niyan, yan yung may love triangle eh. Itinapon lang sa Kalawang eh. Tapos tinarga sa akin. Talaga may walang kasalanan. Beski lumubog na itong mundo. At mamatay na ang dapat mamatay kung ako may kasalanan.
The news of the pending release remained mainstream media content in the country for a few days, until on August 26, President Rodrigo Duterte ordered Justice Secretary Menardo Guevara and Faeldon the suspension of the GCTA program and eventually denied the release of Antonio Sanchez. A week later, September 2, 2019, Bucor Chief Faeldon revealed the death of 3 of the 6 suspects in the case, George Medialdea, Rogelio Corcolon, and Zoilo Ama, during a Senate hearing. Faeldon, however, did not disclose the cause of death of the 3. 2 days later, September 4, President Duterte fired Bucor Chief Faeldon for his documented approval of the release of Sanchez. He would then be replaced by Director General Gerald Bantag, who took his oath on September 20 in front of Justice Secretary Menardo Guevara. A year and a half later, March 27, 2021, Antonio Sanchez passed away peacefully in his sleep inside his cell at the age of 72. In a statement, Bureau of Corrections spokesperson Gabriel Chaclag said Sanchez was brought to the National Bilibid Prison Hospital at 8:30 a.m., where he was declared dead on arrival. He was previously diagnosed with electrolyte imbalance secondary to acute gastroenteritis, chronic kidney disease, hypertension, and benign prostatic hypertrophy. He had also undergone a swab test as part of the cross-examination, but tested negative for COVID-19. To the families of the victims, the long-sought justice for their loved ones had already been achieved, thanks to the witnesses who had the guts to stand up and face the risks involved. Though the serve of justice had a minor hiccup decades later, the outcry of those affected far outweighed the propaganda being established of those in power. This story is a reminder that justice still exists in the country, no matter how clouded, that there will always be people willing to sacrifice their lives in order to avenge those who have been oppressed.